Hello again. As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy over here for EliTheComputerGuy.com and EverymanIT.com. Today's class is Basic Math and Numbers in PHP Programming. So I think this is the 8th class in this PHP programming track, and today we are going to start talking about numbers and start talking about how you do basic math within PHP programming. Now, as I've said going through this is not that difficult, this is not that hard. As long as you follow some basic steps, you'll be fine. So this will probably be about a 30-minute class, but by the time you get done with it, you'll understand how to do basic arithmetic and simple functions in math with PHP programming. So we're going to show you how to add, how to subtract, how to multiply, how to divide. I'm also going to show you how to create random numbers. So if you need to create random numbers, how to do that. And then also how to round numbers to certain decimal places. So these are the basic math and number concepts that you will need to go forward in order to do any PHP programming. As with all the classes in the track, I'm not going to go to an exceedingly high level. I'm going to give you simply enough information so that you can keep going down on this PHP programming track and you can keep up with everything. Everything today will be simple. Just follow along. I'll write some stuff on the whiteboard. We'll do some demonstrations. I swear it's no big deal. Once you understand what's going on, math in PHP is easy. So with that, this class is Basic Math and Numbers and PHP Programming. If you give me a second, we'll dive right in. So doing math in PHP is very easy. Again, as long as you understand how it works and you follow some simple steps. Now, while we're doing math, we're going to do math all within the variable section of our PHP code. So as we've been doing the programming, we open up the PHP code, we close the PHP code down here, we have a section for variables, and then we've been doing print commands and such. So while we are doing math today, we are really only doing math up in this upper section with the variables. All of the math is done up here, and then we will print the results once we have the math completed. Now, the first thing that you have to remember or understand when we are doing math in PHP is, again, we are always going to be working with variables. So then you do $, and then whatever the name of the variable is. So let's say num. So this will create the variable $num, and then we have to set the value to it. So all you do is you do equals, and then let's say 1, and then of course semicolon. So this creates the variable num and sets it to the value of 1. That is all you have to do in order to create a number variable that you will work with in math in PHP. Now you will notice that there are no double quotation marks around this number. So when you're dealing with math, you don't have to worry about the double quotation marks. Don't put them there. Double quotation marks are used for words and strings. Now, if you've used other programming languages, you will have heard of things called ints or floats. So if we create another variable, let's say num2, and have it equal 1.555, this is what is called a float. So an int, or an integer, is any whole number. 2, 3, 10, 110, 550. That's a whole number, that's an int, an integer. 1.55, any number with a decimal point, is what is called a float in a normal programming language. Now in a normal programming language, you have to worry about this. You have to do something that is called declaring variables. In PHP, you do not have to declare variables. You simply create the variable and then you set the value to it. So if you don't know what an int and a float is, don't worry about it. And if you do know what an int and a float is, just realize in PHP it doesn't matter. You simply create the variable and then you set the value of the variable, and that's it. Now when you're doing math then, in PHP, it is very easy because, again, all you're going to do is you're going to create a variable, which is, let's say, $, and then total. And then you use basic math just like you would anywhere. So all you do is, again, we're always going to feed it variables, and the value of the variable is going to be substituted to do what we need to be done. So what we can do is we can do $num, And if we want to add these together, all you do is do plus $num2 semicolon. So what this means is that total equals num plus num2, which means 1 plus 1.555, which means total would then equal 2.555. That's all there is to basic math and PHP. But remember, we're always dealing with variables. So you're going to create the variable, you're going to set the value of the variable to some number, and then when you do the math, you create another variable, and then you have that set the value of the variable to the math you want to do. Num plus num2 equals 2.55. Or, if you want it to be multiplied, you use the star or the asterisk. If you use the asterisk, if you guys can see that thing, that would be multiplication. So num times num2 equals, well, that would be 1.55. If you put minus, it's subtraction. And then if you put the forward slash, it's division. So that's all there is to it. If you do plus, you add these two together. If you do the star, the asterisk, you multiply them. If you do subtract, or the minus, you subtract. And if you do the forward slash, you divide. It's very simple. So these are the basic math symbols that you have hopefully used since about 5th grade. So you should understand that. The big thing with PHP programming is, remember, you're always working with variables. So num equals 1, num2 equals 1.55, and then to get the total, you create a value or a variable for the total and set the value of that variable to the math equation that you've created. Now the one thing with this is, again, remember basic math from, let's say, 6th or 7th grade, you may have heard of precedence in math. What precedence means is when you have a long equation, so let's say num plus num2 times num3, right? If you have a longer equation with multiple things going on, first you multiply and divide, then you go back and add and subtract. So if you actually wrote this out, so you had total, $total equals num plus num2 times num3, that means first num2 and num3 would be multiplied, and then you would add num to that. So precedence means first you multiply and divide, then you add and subtract. And you go left to right when you do this. So this is normal precedence from, again, like I say, 7th grade math. Hopefully you guys have known this, unless you're not in 7th grade yet, and then you will learn this. But this is what is called precedence. Now, something to understand about precedence is if you're doing more complicated math, you have to understand how this works because you can use parentheses. So in the example, I'm going to show you where we add two variables together and then we multiply them by a sales tax. So if I had it like this, that wouldn't work. So what I will do is I will use parentheses. This means that num1 plus num2 will get added together first, and then this will be multiplied by num3. So again, this is all very basic math. This is like pre-algebra math that you learn in like 7th grade, but precedence is very important. If you don't understand precedence, go on to Google and do a little search on math precedence. But this is all there is to it. So remember, when you're going to be doing this basic math in PHP, you create the variable, you set it to a number value, again, no quotation marks, just the number. Then, when you're going to create the value for the total, that is still going to be done up here in this variable section. So the total is going to equal num plus num2 times num3. So all of that is done up here. Again, when we're doing basic math, plus equals plus, minus equals minus, asterisk, the star equals multiplication, and forward slash equals division. These are the basic mathematical operators. And then of course, again, you have parentheses to state, I want these things added together first, and then it will be multiplied by whatever is on the outside. If you understand those basic concepts, like I said, math in PHP is pretty easy. So with that, Again, I'm going to write this stuff on the whiteboard, then we're going to go to the computer, so I'll show you how it works. So with that, let's go onto the computer. I'll do a full demonstration on how this works, and I think it will make a lot more sense once you've seen it actually on a computer. So with that, let's go do a demonstration, and I'll show you how this goes. So here we are back at my Windows 7 computer. So I've already have Notepad++ open, and I've already created a file, math_script.php. So this will be our PHP script that we will be dealing with. Now the last few classes I've created HTML forms and sent data to the PHP scripts from the HTML forms. To try to keep this simple today, I'm only going to be using this one script. So I'm going to create the variables and hard code the values of the variables within the script. But at this point, you should understand how to create an HTML form and send the data from the form to this script if you wanted to do it that way. Now the first thing that we're going to do, as we always do, is we actually have to open the PHP script, so bracket $PHP, and then as I say, you should always close the PHP script when you open it, just to make sure that you don't forget about it. So you open the PHP script and then you close the PHP script. So today we are just going to create a demo of a cash register type program. So what we're going to do is we're going to have two items, item 1, item 2. We are going to have a tax. We are going to do a subtotal, we will do a tax total, and we will do a total for the whole bill. So this will be as if somebody is buying two items. We'll find how much the tax is for those two items. We'll total everything together and give them a receipt. So the first thing we have to do is create a variable for item 1 and then set the value of the variable. So we'll just set it to 1. And so that'll connotate $1. And then we'll do semicolon. So we create item 1 and then we set it to 1. Now remember, when you're dealing with numbers, you don't have to use the double quotation marks. You just put the number itself. Now we'll do item 2. And then we'll set the value of item 2 to, let's say, 2.55. Semicolon. Now the important thing here is in other programming languages you have to do what is called declaring a variable. Declaring a variable is where you state whether the variable is an int or a float, or what type of variable it is. Ints or integers are whole numbers. 1, 2, 5, 10, 110. Those are all whole numbers. Floats are numbers with decimal points. 2.55, 2.88, 1.33. So the thing in PHP to remember is that it doesn't matter. Numbers are numbers. You can have an item and you can set it to the value of 1, or you can have an item and you can set it to the value of 2.55, and it doesn't matter. Now finally, we are going to set the value of tax. So we just do $tax equals, and then do 0.05. And then semicolon. Again, always remember that semicolon. So item 1 equals 1, item 2 equals 2.55, tax equals 0.05. So these are the numbers that we are going to be dealing with, and now we do the math. So the math right now is always going to be done within this variable area. So we will be dealing with variables, and then we will print out the value of the variables later. But all the math is done up in this section with the variables. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to create a subtotal. So the subtotal is simply the value of item 1 plus item 2. So we do subtotal equals, and then all you have to do is item 1 plus item 2 semicolon, and that is the math. That is the math in PHP. So you create the variable subtotal, and then you have it equal to item 1 plus item 2. Now the next thing that we need is we need the tax total. So this is the tax on this item. So we do tax total. And so this creates the variable tax total, and we have it equal to. Now with tax total, it's going to be a little different. We have to talk about precedence, because remember, multiplication is supposed to happen first whenever you're looking at a math problem. So you multiply and divide first, and then you add or subtract if you have multiple numbers in an equation. Well, if we're trying to do a tax on item 1 plus item 2, we have to add item 1 to item 2 and then multiply by that tax. So that is where we're going to do the parentheses. So we'll do item 1 plus item 2 within the parentheses. So this will add item 1 plus item 2. Then we do the little star. This is for multiplication. And then we do tax, semicolon. So what this does, and this is very important that you remember precedence, when programming, you don't always need to know really high level math, but you do need to know a little bit of math. So precedence means by putting item 1 plus item 2 within the parentheses, it means this will be added first, and then it will be multiplied by the tax of 0.05. And then all we do now is we do the total. So this will be the total for this bill. So we'll do equals, and then what we'll do is we'll do subtotal plus semicolon. So it's subtotal plus tax total, semicolon. So what this does is the total for the bill will be the subtotal, which is item 1 plus item 2, plus the tax total, which is here, it's 0.05 times basically the subtotal, and that's all you have to do. So this is all the math that we have done. Again, right now in this level of PHP, you should do all of this math up here in the variable section. Don't try to do it down when we start printing things in the script. That will just turn everything into a mess. So with that, we can now print things out and see how this works. So we can do print like we always do, and then we do double quotation marks. And so what we can do is we can say, let's say, item 1, semicolon, and then we do the value of item 1. Then we're going to do a break, because remember, we're going to be doing HTML. So this will put on the first line, item 1, and then the value of item 1. Then what we'll do is we'll do item 2, and then we'll put the value of item 2. And then we'll do subtotal. So we'll say, what is a subtotal? So what is item 1 plus item 2? So we'll say subtotal. And then we put the value of subtotal. Oops, forgot to put that break in there. Because remember, we're putting these breaks in here because this is how it will be viewed by the HTML. Remember, the web browser looks for HTML coding for the formatting. Then we're going to do tax, semicolon, and then we simply do the value of tax total. So since this is like a receipt program, we don't want tax. The rate of tax is 0.05. We want the total amount of the tax, which comes here. And then finally we do total. And then we just and then we just close. So what this will do is it'll do item 1, and then it'll say the value of item 1, item 2, the value of item 2. It'll ask it to say the subtotal, and then it will give the subtotal, item 1 plus item 2. Then it'll do the tax. What's the tax on this order? That will come from total tax, item 1 plus item 2 times the rate of tax, and then the total is a subtotal plus the tax total. So that's all there is. Should be pretty simple. Again, we start with we do print, double quotation marks, we say all of this, and then we close the double quotation marks. And remember, I put all these breaks in here because when this is printed to that HTML screen for the web browser to view, that web browser uses HTML for the formatting. So now all I have to do is hit save, and then I upload. It is now uploaded, and I do refresh, and there we go. So now we have item 1 equals 1. Item 2 equals 2.55. Subtotal equals 3.55. So item 1 plus item 2 equals 3.55. Tax equals 0.1775. And then total equals 3.7275. So that is how the math is done here. Again, we create the variable, then we set the value of the variable, and then when we do the math, again, we create new variables that we want to set the value for. So we create subtotal, and that's item 1 plus item 2. Tax total, again, remember precedence. So you do the parentheses, item 1 plus item 2, close parentheses, times tax, and then total equals subtotal plus tax total, and then you just print out everything here as I've shown you before. So with that, let's go back out to the real world, and then we're going to talk a little bit about formatting some of these numbers. So I think you'll agree that basic math in PHP is not that difficult. You just have to remember that whole thing up with the variables. Now the next thing I want to talk about is basic number tricks. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to create random numbers, and I will show you how to round numbers. So again, these may not seem very complicated, but this will be very necessary as you go on in PHP programming. So the first thing is sometimes you need to come up with random numbers for some reason. Whether it's for testing, or frankly whether it's for if you're going to be doing some kind of hacking routine where you need to randomly select different variables so that some kind of security software doesn't realize that it's a program doing it. But there's a lot of times that you will need to be able to come up with random numbers. Now, the process to come up with random numbers is very easy. All you have to do is call a function. So as we've talked about many times in this PHP track, a function is like a small program within PHP that performs a certain task. So the random function performs the task of creating random numbers. So all you have to do to call the random function is you use rand, and then you have parentheses, and then semicolon. So this is a function, rand parentheses. Then all you do is you put in the first number for the lowest possible number the random number could be, then you do comma, and then you do the highest number it could be. So if I do rand parenthesis 1 comma 50 parenthesis semicolon, this means this will create a random number between 1 and 50. If I made this 10 and 500, it would create a random number between 10 and 500. That's all there is to it. Now again, whenever we're dealing with numbers in PHP, we want to be dealing with variables. So all we would do to create a random number variable is we would just do $ random. This creates the variable equals rand parenthesis 10 comma 500 parenthesis semicolon. This creates the variable random and then sets the value of that variable to a random number between 10 to 500. That's it. That's all there is to random. It is that simple. So that's random. That's for creating random numbers. Right now this may not seem like it's that important, but I think it's probably one of the most important things you will ever learn in programming, especially for you like security and hacker type guys. The next thing that you'll need to know for a number trick is the round function. So all the round function does is imagine you have a number, let's say, you do the math and it comes up to 2.555888889, right? And for whatever reason, all you want is that number to only go to the second decimal place. So you have a number 2.5588896, and all you want is for the number to go to the second decimal place. Well, that is where you use the round function. You put this number in round, so you do 2.5588896, then you do comma, and then you do how many places of decimal places you want, so we would say 2, and then it will round this number to the second decimal place. So if you have 2.5588886, since 8 is above 5, that means it would make this number 2.56. It would simply round to that decimal place. That's all the round function does. Again, it doesn't seem very important, but if you start creating scripts that deal with things like money, so dollars and cents, you only ever want that to go to the second decimal place. Nobody knows what to do with 0.1188999 pennies. Doesn't make any sense, whereas $0.18 does. Now again, we're always going to be dealing with the variables, so all you would do is you would do $ round to create a variable, or whatever you want to call it. I'm calling it round, to create a variable. Then you have an equal round, parenthesis, the number, the decimal place, parenthesis, semicolon. That creates the variable round and sets the variable round to the value of 2.5588896 to the second decimal place, which basically means 2.56. And that's all there is for both random and for round. Again, one of the things with PHP, whenever you're dealing with numbers, is you can also substitute these with variables. So you could have, let's say, you make, num equals 5, with this random, you could have this be $num, one variable, comma 500. So it would be between the value of this variable and 500. I hope that makes sense. But these are the two concepts. Random will create random numbers between the first and the last number you tell it. Round will simply round to whatever decimal place that you care about. Again, when it rounds though, it will actually round. So it will round up or it will round down based on what you're doing. Depending on what math or what you're doing with the math, that may or may not matter. For you guys at this point, I think rounding is fine. There's other things that you can do with these numbers, but again, I'm trying to keep this all simple so you guys don't lose your place and get frustrated and give up with all this. So with that, again, let's go to the computer. I will show you how random and round work in computers in the PHP script. And again, as always, I think it'll make a lot more sense when you really see how this works. So here we are back at my Windows 7 computer with Notepad++ open. I'm reusing my file math_script.php, and now I'm going to show you how to create random numbers and how to round numbers. So this is pretty simple, but it's going to be very important as we progress in the PHP track. So the first thing that we're going to do again is we have to create the PHP script. So bracket, question mark, PHP, couple of enters, and then question mark bracket. So open PHP, close PHP. Now the first thing that we're going to do is going to create a random number. So we are going to create a variable called random, and then we are going to set it to the value of what a function rand gives it. So it makes sense. What we're going to do is we're going to create the variable, random, just like we've created all the other variables, and we're going to set it equal to. But what we're going to do now is we're going to set it equal to the output of a function. So the function we're dealing with is called rand. So rand is a function. It's like a little program within the PHP programming language. So it provides and does a specific routine. So rand is the function. Now all you do with rand is within these parentheses, you want it to give it the low number, so the lowest number that could randomly be selected, and then you do comma, and then the highest number. So now what I've said is random is going to randomly generate a number between 1 to 50, and then the variable random is going to be equal to that. So the value of random will be whatever this rand function spits out. So all I have to do is I go down here to print, and then do double quotation marks, and I say the random number is, and then I do random. So basically it's just going to print out the text the random number is, and then it will print the value of the variable random, and of course semicolon. And then if we save this and then we upload this, you will see when we do refresh, see the random number is 39. Now the random number is 44. Now the random number is 50. Now 7. Now 50. Now 17. Now 4. Now 20. Now 26. Now 20. So this will dynamically create a random number. Now again, a lot of you guys, want to learn about hacking and all of that. And interestingly enough, this little function here will probably be the most important function you ever learn for hacking. Because especially when you're trying to penetrate systems or do things, remember that most security software looks for a routine. It looks for things that do the exact same thing that could be destructive, and then it tries to block that. Well, by using little random functions like this, you can randomly attack different systems so that the system doesn't really understand what's going on. So you'll learn about that more as we continue in the PHP track. But this little random function right here will probably be the most important thing you ever learn for hacking and for a lot of other programming stuff. Just random is an incredibly useful function. But this is all you do to create a random number. So you do random equals rand low and high. So I could say 100 and 500, and so it will be the low end will be 100 and the high end will be 500. And then if I refresh and upload, you see now it's 240 or 494 or 104 or 108 or 366. So you decide what the high and the low is here. If I wanted to go into it more, I could show you that you could even put variables in here. So you could put a high variable and a low variable and plug those variables into here, and then random would see the value of those variables and then would go between those two. But that's all that random is. So that's pretty simple. Now the next thing that we're going to look at is round. So I'm just going to delete this. And so round is, especially when you're doing math, sometimes you get decimal places that go on way too long for whatever reason. Maybe it's not good for the math, or maybe you just don't want the end user to see 2.777788899999999, and so you need to turn that into a smaller number, especially let's say when we're dealing with money. So with round, you're also dealing with a function. So we're going to create the variable round, and we're going to set it equal to what the round function creates. So with round, all it is round and then parentheses. Now the first value that you give to round is the number that you're dealing with. So let's say 2.333333, right? And then you do comma, and then you say, where do you want to round this to? So what this is asking for is how many decimal places do you want this rounded to? So if you say 2, that means it's going to round it to here, right here. So it'll be 2.33 rounded for the rest. And that's all there is. So now all we have to do is if we do print, double quotation marks, and we say the rounded number is, and then we put in round. So this will drop in the value of round. So we're going to say we're creating the variable round. We're setting the value to the rounding of 2.333, comma 2. Now again, for this 2.333, we could dump in a variable here. I'm just trying to keep this simple right now. And then we upload. And we refresh, and so we say the rounded number is 2.33. So remember with rounding, if a number is 4 or below, it will round down. If it's 5 or above, it will round up. So let's say this was 2.77777, and we round it to the second decimal place. We hit save, we hit upload. Now it'll be 2.78. Why? Because 7 is above 5, and so when the number is rounded, it will be rounded up. This is just one of those little math things you just kind of have to keep in mind to make sure that you don't have any problems. Now to show you that you can put variables into these functions, just so you've actually see this, I'm now going to create the variable number. And we're going to make it equal to 5.888888. Semicolon. So we create a variable number, and we make it equal to 5.888888. Now instead of putting a number here for the round, I will put that variable. So what happens is when this function is run, it will put in the value of the variable number, and then it will round it to the second place. So we just hit save, and we upload, and then we go here, and now we see 5.89. So again, I've been hard coding all these numbers into these functions, but you can drop a variable in there. So you can create a variable, set the value of the variable, and then put then call that variable within the function. And so that's all there is to it. So I showed you how to do random, and again, rand is going to be an absolutely amazingly useful tool for you in the future. And then round, mainly what you're going to be using round for, again, like if you use cash register programs, most of the time, you're going to round it to the second position. Just to show you, if you want, you could round it to the fourth position. Again, this is all up to you, depending on what you decide to do. So if we refresh, now 5.8889. But that's random and round, and I showed you how to do addition before, and basically with the math is just plus, minus, little star for the multiplication, and the slash for the division, and that's all there is for math. So this is the basic concept for how you do math within PHP. So that's all there is to basic math and numbers in PHP programming. Showed you how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and we talked about precedence. Remember, whenever we're doing these math things, that's all within the variables. We create a variable and then we set the value of the variable to whatever the equation is that we're creating. So that's all done up on the variable section. Again, for any of you that haven't had basic, pre-algebra in about 20 years like me, you may have to open up Google and take a look at math precedents, because that's how all this works. Again, if you put an equation inside parentheses, then that equation will be done first, and then it will be added or subtracted or multiplied to what is outside the parentheses. Again, it's precedence. I'm sure a math teacher could explain this very easily. It's not too bad. Remember, you multiply or divide before you add or subtract, except where you have parentheses, and then that stuff's done first. Yes, any 11-year-old should know how to do that. And then finally, I showed you how to do both random and round. So random is where we come up with a random number, and round is where we round the number to a specific decimal place. These things will come up in the future, so it's good for you to know them now. Again, with the script, I only used one script, the script.php, and the reason is I didn't want to get this overcomplicated by creating a form and sending data through the form to the script and doing all of that. But do remember, I've already taught you how to use HTML forms. I've already taught you how to send data from the HTML forms to the PHP. I've already shown you how to turn that data into variables. So if you want to start playing around creating basic math programs with HTML forms and this type of PHP script, you should start doing that now. Again, we are about 8 classes into this track, so we are getting to the place where you should really start playing. You should go to websites such as php.net or do basic Google searches. Again, all of my classes I'm going to try to keep exceedingly simple so that you can't mess anything up. But because I do keep them so exceedingly simple, I skip a lot of other concepts that might confuse the matter. But you guys are home, you guys can play around, so I would suggest once you get done with classes like this on math now, you do your own Google research and you start playing around and seeing what else you can do. Because again, I'm trying to keep this very simple so people don't get frustrated, but in doing so, frankly, I skip a lot of things. So at this point, we're about 8 classes in, you should be learning to play around and test things yourself. I've shown you how I use Notepad++, and as I do changes, I upload it and then test those changes. That's the way you should start playing around with some of the programming and see what you can do. Try to do more than what I'm doing. Play with it. I mean, just like anything in the technology world, it really comes down to playing with it. The more you play with it, the more you'll understand it. The more you'll understand it, the more money you'll make. See how that works? It all comes down to money at the end of the day. So this was basic math and numbers in PHP programming. I'm Eli the Computer Guy over here for EliTheComputerGuy.com. I enjoyed teaching this class and I look forward to seeing you at the next one.